In this video, we'll look at Demo 4. Let's start by just kind of reviewing what we've seen so far. In the first demo of this module, we've looked at what functions are, how functions are defined with the define DEF keyword, and then you make up a name, you put in some parentheses, and then you put a colon, and then you make sure that any code that you want to be included in the function is indented. Later on, you can then call the function. Functions can have parameters. So we see parameters have been added for the file name and some student data that you want to work with. The file name will be used to open the file. The student data can be an empty list that you can fill up with data, in this case by reading the data from the file, and then return the data that you've now filled up with, or the variable data that you filled. So that now, when that function gets called, and you pass in the empty list and the name of the file, it will fill up the data and return it to you so that you can continue working with it. We've also seen how you can put functions into classes. Classes are a way of organizing either data, like variables, or functions, like add and subtract. That's definitely something that helps you to keep things nice and organized and becomes more and more important as we get many, many lines of programming code. We can continue working on that by thinking about how to organize our functions based on the concept of the separation of concerns. With the separation of concerns, we have the data layer, the processing layer, and the presentation layer. The data layer represents the data that we're trying to work with. In our case, we're keeping it simple by just putting a couple of variables within the results class. The calculator class that we have represents our processing layer. You give me some values, I will add them or subtract them. We're processing the data that we are working with and storing. These two classes work together within the body of the main script. In our case, we also want to reorganize things just a little bit more than we had previously. In the last demo, we had results and calculator, but we're adding a new class this time. This class is for input-output, or the presentation layer. This represents the third layer of the separation, the common separation of concern patterns. You can have more layers, that's true, but typically the three that you will commonly work with are the data layer, processing layer, sometimes known as the business layer, and the presentation layer, or input-output layer. That's the name of the class, input-output. In the input-output, we put the commands, the statements, that displayed information to the user or captured information from the user. If we look back at the third demo, we can see that in the main body, after the classes have been defined, in the main body of the script, outside of the classes and the functions, we had the code that would capture data from the user and present data to the user. But now we're reorganizing those statements into its own class to display the results and to input the results, input the value, excuse me. Now the main body of the script has less code in it. It's not that the other one did not work. It's just that this is now more organized. And that's the key that we're trying to focus on. We're trying to keep our code as organized and legible to other developers and to ourselves in the future as possible. If we do it right, not only will it be more easy to read, but it'll also be more reusable so that we can actually use functions that we've created, such as input values or display results, or maybe some kind of processing commands in other programs as well. And if it's not exactly the same, we may have to make some modifications, at least we'll have some starting code to work with. This concept of organizing for reusability is also something that is part of the separation of concerns pattern. The pattern describes a way of making code more readable, legible, same thing, and reusable. And that is going to be the core focus of our next module as well, as we start looking at more advanced data classes. I'll see you there.